Reading Ambedkar. Now we are going to read a reply to the Mahatma by Ambedkar. When Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar wrote Annihilation of Caste, in reply to that, Gandhi wrote his side of explanation, and in reply to that, Dr. Ambedkar again wrote the reply to Mahatma. So I read out here a reply to the Mahatma B.R. Ambedkar. And this also is written in points, and there are total 11 points are there. I'll try to read out all the 11 points in this reading. Kindly listen carefully, subscribe the channel, share it, and like the channel. To the Mahatma B.R. Ambedkar. Point number 1. I appreciate greatly the honor done to me by Mahatma in the taking notice in his Harijan of the speech on the caste which I had prepared for the Jat-Pat Todak Mandal. From a perusal of his review of my speech, it is clear that Mahatma completely dissent from the views I have expressed on the subject of caste. I am not in the habit of entering into controversy with my opponents unless there are special reasons which compel me to act otherwise. Had my opponents been some mean and obscure person, I would not have persuaded him. But my opponent being the Mahatma himself, I feel I must attempt to meet the case to the contrary, which he has sought to put forth. While I appreciate the honor he had done to me, I must confess to a sense of surprise on finding that of all people the Mahatma should accuse me of desire to seek publicity, as he seems to do when he suggests that in publishing the undelivered speech, my object was to see that I was not forgotten. Whatever the Mahatma may choose to say, my object in publishing the speech was to provoke the Hindus to think and to take stock of their position. I have never hankered for publicity, and if I may say so, I have more of it than I wished or need. But supposing it was out of the motive of gaining publicity that I printed the speech, I would cast a stone at me, surely not those who, like Mahatma, live in the glass house. 2. Point number 2. Motive apart, what has the Mahatma to say on the question raised by me in the speech? First of all, anyone who reads my speech will realize that the Mahatma has entirely missed the issue raised by me, and that the issue he has raised are not the issues that arise out of what is pleased to call my indictment of the Hindus. The principal point which I have tried to make out in my speech may be catalogued as follows. 2.2 and 1 point. The caste has ruined the Hindus. Point number 1, the caste has ruined the Hindus. 2, that the reorganization of Hindu society on the basis of Chaturvarna is implies because the Varna Vyavastha is like a leaky pot or like a man running at the nose. It is incapable of sustaining itself by its own virtue and has an inherent tendency of degenerated into a caste system unless there is a legal sanction behind it which can be enforced against anyone transgression is Varna. 3. That the recognition of Hindu society on the basis of Chaturvarna would be harmful because the effect of the Varna Vyavastha would be the degraded the masses by the denying them opportunity to acquire knowledge and emasculate them by denying that the right to be armed. 4. The Hindu society must be recognized on the religion basis which would recognize the principle of liberty, equality and fraternity. 5. That in order to achieve this object, the sense of religious sanctity behind caste and varna must be destroyed. 6. The sanctity of the caste and varna can be destroyed only by discarding the divine authority of Shastras. 2.3. It will be noticed that the question raised by Mahatma are absolutely beside the point and show that the main argument of the speech was lost upon him. 3.1. Let me examine the substance of the point made by Mahatma. The first point made by Mahatma is that the texts cited by me are not authentic. I confess I am no authority on this matter, but I should like to state that the texts cited by me are all taken from the writings of late Mr. Tilak, who was a recognized authority on the Sanskrit language and on the Hindu Shastras. He His second point is that the Shastras should be interpreted not by the learned but by the saint, and that is saint have understood them. The Shastra do not support caste and untouchability. 3.2. As regarded the first point, what I would like to ask Mahatma is that does it avail to anyone if texts are interpolations, and if they have been differently interpreted by the saints? The masses do not make any distinction between the text and as a genuine and text which are interpolation. The masses do not know what the texts are. They are too illiterate to know the content of the Shastras. They have believed that they have been told, and they have been told is that the Shastras do enjoy as religious duties and observance of the caste and untouchability. 3.3. With regard to the saints, one must admit that whomsoever different and elevating their teachings may have been compared to those of the merely learned, they have been lamentably ineffective. They have been ineffective for two reasons. First, none of the saints ever attacked the caste system. On the contrary, they were staunch believer in the system of caste. Most of the believe they live and died the member of the caste and which they retrospectively belonged. So passionately attached was Gyanadev to his status as a Brahmin that where the Brahmin of the Pithan would not admit him to their fold, and he moved heaven and earth to his status as a Brahmin recognized by the Brahmin fraternity. 3.4. And even the saint Eknath, who was now figured in the film Dharmatma as a hero of having shown the courage to touch an untouchable and dine with them, did so not because he was opposed to caste and untouchability, because he felt that the pollution caused thereby could be washed away by the bathe of a sacred river, water of the river Ganges. The saints have never, according to the study, carried on a companion against caste and untouchability. They were not concerned with the struggle between men. They were concerned with the relation between man and God. They did not preach that all men were equal. They preached that all men were equal in the eyes of God, and they were different at a very innocuous position which nobody can find difficult to preach or dangerous to believe in. 3.5. The second reason why teachings of the saints prove ineffective was because the masses have been taught that the saints might break caste because the common man must not. A saint therefore never became an example of to follow. He always remained a pious man to be honored. That the mass have remained a staunch believer in the caste and untouchability show that the pious lives and the noble sermons of the saints have had no effect on their lives and conduct and against the teachings of the Shastras. Thus it can be matter of no consolation that there were saints and there is a Mahatma who understand the Shastras differently from the learned few or ignorant many. 3.6. That the masses hold a different view of the Shastras is a fact which should and must be reckoned with. How that is to be dealt with, except the denouncing the authority of the Shastras which continues to govern their conduct, is a question which the Mahatma is not considered. Whatever plan the Mahatma put forth as an effective means of the free masses from the teachings of the Shastras, he must accept that the pious life led by the good Smartian may be very elevating to himself, but in India, the attitude of the common masses has sent to the Mahatma, and to honor but not to follow, one cannot make much out of it. 4.1. The third point made by Mahatma is that a religion professed by Chaitanya, Gyanadev, Tukaram, Tiruvalluvar, Ramakrishna Paramahans, etc. cannot be devoid of merit and is made out by me, and that a religion has to be judged not by its worst specimen but the best might have been produced. I agree with every word of this statement, but I do not quite understand what Mahatma wished to prove thereby. That religion should be judged not by its worst specimen but the best is true enough, but does it dispose of the matter? I say it does not. The question still remains, why the worst number so many and the best so few? To my mind there are two conceivable answers of this question. Number one, the worst by reason of some original perversity of theirs are morally uneducable and are therefore incapable of making the remotest approach to the religious ideal. Or two, the religious ideal is a wholly wrong ideal which was given a wrong moral twist to the lives of the many, and that the best have become best in spite of the wrong ideal. In fact, they give to the wrong twist to a turn in the right direction. 4.3. Of these two explanations, I am not prepared to accept the first, and I am sure that even Mahatma will not insist upon the contrary. To my mind, the second is the only logical and reasonable explanation, unless the Mahatma has a third alternative to explain why the worst are so many and the best are few. If the second is the only explanation, then obviously the argument of the Mahatma that a religion should be judged by its best followers carries us nowhere except to pity and the lot of many who have gone wrong because they have been made to worship wrong ideals. 5.1. The argument of the Mahatma that Hindus would be tolerable if only many were to follow the example of the saints is fallacious and another reason. In the connection to see Illuminist articles, Morality and the Structural by H.N. Brailsford in Aryan Path of April 1936, by citing the name of such illustrious person in as Chaitanya, etc. What the Mahatma seems to me suggests that its broadest and the simplest form is the Hindu society can be made tolerable and even happy without any fundamental changes in its structure. If all the high caste Hindus can persuade to follow high standard of morality in the dealings with the low caste Hindus, I am totally opposed to this kind of ideology. 5.2. I can respect those of the caste Hindus who try to realize the high social order in their life. Without such men, India would be an uglier and unless happy place to live in that it is. But nonetheless, anyone who relies on an attempt to turn the member of the caste Hindus into better men by improving their personal character, in my judgment, wasting this energy and hugging an illusion. Can personal character make the maker of the armament a good man? That is a man who will sell shell and that will not burst the gas that will not poison. If it cannot, how can you accept personal character to make a man loaded with the consciousness of a caste as good man? That is a man who would treat his fellow man and his friends an equal. To be true to himself, he must deal with all fallen man either as a superior or inferior, according to the case may be. At any rate, differently from his own caste fellow, he can even expected to deal with his fellow man as his kinsman and equal. 5.3. As a matter of fact, a Hindu does not treat all those who are not of his caste as they were aliens, and who could be discriminated against with impunity, and against with any fraud or risk may be practiced without shame. This is to say that there can be a better or a worse Hindu, but a good Hindu cannot be. This is so not because there is anything worse and the personal character. In fact, that is wrong. The entire basis of the relationship to his fellow, the best of the men can be moral if the basis of the relationship between them and their fellow is fundamentally a wrong relationship. To a slave, his master may be better or worse, but there cannot be a good master. A good man cannot be a master, and a master cannot be a good man. The same applies to the relationship between high caste and low caste. To the low caste man, a high caste man can be better or worse as compared to other high caste men. A high caste man cannot be good man. So insofar as must have a low caste man to distinguish himself as a high caste, it cannot be a good or low caste man to be conscious that there is a high caste man above him. I have argued in my speech that a society based on varna or a caste in society which is based on a wrong relationship. I had hoped that Mahatma would attempt to demolish my argument, but instead of doing that, he has merely retreated his belief in Chaturvarna without disclosing the ground on which it is based. 6.1. Does the Mahatma practice what he preach? One does not like to make personal reference in an argument which is general in the application. But when one preaches a doctrine and hold it as a dogma, there is a curiosity to know how far he practices and he preaches. It may be that the failure to the practice is due to the ideal being too high to be attainable. It may be that in failure a practice is due to innate hypocrisy of the man. In any case, he exposes his conduct to examination, and I must not be blamed. I asked how far as the Mahatma attempted to realize his ideal in his own case. The Mahatma is a Baniya trade by birth. His ancestors has abandoned trading in favor of mentorship, which is a calling of the Brahmin. In his own life, therefore, he became a Mahatma when the occasion came to him for choose his career, and it preferred to law to scale. On abandoning law and becoming half saint and a half politician, he has never touched trading, which is his ancestral calling. His youngest son, I take the one who is faithful follower of his father, was born as Vaishya. He married a Brahmin daughter and chosen to serve as a newspaper magnate. The Mahatma is not known to have condemned him for his not following the ancestral calling. It may be wrong and charitable to judge an ideal by its worst specimen, but surely the Mahatma as a specimen is no better. And if even he fails to realize the ideal, then the ideal must be an impossible ideal, quite opposed to the practical instincts of man. 6.4. Students of Carlyle know that he often spoke on a subject before he thought about it. I wonder whether such has not been the case with the Mahatma regarded to the subject matter of the caste. Otherwise, certain questions which occurred to me would not have been escaped him. When can a calling to be deemed to have become an ancestral calling and so make it binding on a man? Must a man follow his ancestral calling if it does not suit his capacity, even when it ceases to be profitable? Must a man live in his ancestral calling if he finds it to be immoral? Even if everyone must persuade an ancestral calling, then it must follow that a man must continue to be pimped because of his grandfather was a pimp, and a man must continue to be prostitute because his grandfather was a prostitute. Is that Mahatma prepared to accept the logical conclusion of his doctrine? To me, his ideal of the following one's ancestral calling is not only an impossible and impractical ideal, but it is also moral and or indefensible ideal. 7.1. The Mahatma sees great virtue in a Brahmin remaining a Brahmin of all life. Leaving aside the fact that there may be a Brahmin who do not like to remain Brahmin all their lives, what can we say about those Brahmins who have clung in their ancestral calling of the priesthood? Do they do so for and faith in the virtue of the principle of ancestral calling, or do they do so for motives of the filthy lucre? The Mahatma does not seem to concern himself with such queries. He is satisfied at these scales are real Brahmin are who live on the alms really given to them and giving freely, and they have spiritual treasure. This is how a hereditary Brahmin priest appeared to Mahatma, a carrier of the spiritual treasure. But another portrait of the hereditary Brahmin can also be drawn. A Brahmin can be a priest to Vishnu, a god of love. He can be priest of Shankar, the god of destructor, and he can be priest of Buddha Gaya, worshipping Buddha, the greatest teacher of mankind, who taught the noblest doctrine of love, and who can be priest to Kali, the goddess which must daily sacrifice of an animal to satisfy her thirst for blood. He will be a priest of the temple of Rama, the Kshatriya god. He will also be a priest of the temple of the Parshuram, the god who took an avatar to destroy the Kshatriya. He can be a priest to the Brahman, creator of the world, and he can be priest to Pir, who is God Allah and will not brook the claim of Brahmin share his spiritual domain over the world. No one can say that this is a picture which is not true to life. 7.3. If this is a true picture, he does not know what to say of his capacity to bear loyalties to the god and goddesses whose attributes are so antagonistic that no honest man can be devoted to all of them. The Hindu rely upon this extraordinary phenomena as evidence of the greatest virtue of the religion, namely its Catholicity, its spirit of the toleration. And against this false view, it can be urged that what is toleration and Catholicity may be really nothing more than creditable than difference and false latitudinarianism. That is how attitudes are harder to distinguish and their outer seeming, but they are so virtually unlike they really in their real quality. 7.4. That a man is ready to render homage to many gods and goddesses may be cited as an evidence of his tolerant spirit. But it cannot also be evident of the insincerity born to desire to serve the time. I am sure that this toleration is merely insincerity. If this view is well founded, one may ask, what spiritual treasure can there be within a person who is ready to be priest and devotee to any deity which is serve his purpose to worship to and to adore? Not only must such a person be deemed to be bankrupt of all spiritual treasure, but office to priest so elevating of the profession and that of a priest simply because it is ancestral without belief, merely as a mechanical process handed down from father to son, is not conservation of the virtue. It is really a prostitution of the noble profession, which is not other than service of religion. 8.1. Why does Mahatma clinch to the theory of everyone following his higher or his ancestral calling? He gives his reason nowhere, but there must be some reason, although he does not care to. Years ago, caste versus class. In the young India, he argues that a caste system was better than a class system on the ground that the caste was the best possible adjustment for the social stability. If that is the reason why the Mahatma clinged to the theory of everyone following his ancestral calling, and is clinging to his false view of his social life, everybody wants social stability, and some adjustment must be made to the relationship between individual and classes in order to that stability must be had. But two things I am sure nobody wants. One thing, nobody wants a static relationship, something that is unalterable and something that is fixed for all time. Stability is wanted, but not at the cost of the change when the change is imperative. The second thing nobody wants is mere adjustment. Adjustment is wanted, but not just sacrifice of the social justice. It can be said that the adjustment of the social relationship on the basis of caste, that is, on the basis of each of his hereditary calling, avoid these two evils. I am convinced that it does not. Far from being the best possible adjustment, I have no doubt that it is the worst possible kind, inasmuch as I offend against the canon of the social adjustment, namely fluidity and equity. 9. Some might think that the Mahatma has made much progress, inasmuch as how only believe in Varna does not believe in caste. It is true that there was a time when Mahatma was full-blooded and a blue-blooded Sanatani Hindu. He believed in the Vedas, Upanishads and Puranas and all that goes by the name of Hindu scriptures and therefore and avataras and rebirth. He believes in the caste and defended it with the vigor of the orthodoxy. He condemned the cry of the interdining and intermarrying, and argued that restraint about his interdining to a great extent helped the cultivation of the willpower and the conservation of a certain social virtue. It is good that the repudiated his sanctimonious nonsense and admitted that the caste is a harmful both of spiritual and national growth, and maybe his sons marry outside his caste and has had something to do with his change of view. But as the Mahatma really progressed, what is the nature of the Varna for which the Mahatma stands? It is the Vedic conception as commonly understood and preached by Swami Dayanand Saraswati and his followers, the Arya Samajist. The essence of the Vedic conception of the Varna is pursuit of the calling which is appreciated to one natural aptitude. The essence of the Mahatma's conception of Varna is the pursuit of one's ancestral calling, irrespective of natural aptitude. 9.1. What is the difference between the caste and Varna is understood by Mahatma. I found none. Defined by the Mahatma, Varna become merely a different name of the caste for the simple reason that it is the same in essence, namely pursuit of one's ancestral calling. From the making progress, the Mahatma has suffered retrogression by putting this interpretation upon the Vedic conception of Varna. He had really made ridiculous what was sublime. While I reject the Vedic Varna Vyavastha for reason given in the speech, I must admit that the Vedic theory of Varna and interpreted by Swami Dayanand and some other is a sensible and an inoffensive thing. I did not admit birth at the determining factor in fixing case of an individual in society. It only recognized worth. 9.4. The Mahatma's views of Varna not only make nonsense of the Vedic Varna, but it makes it an abominable thing. Varna and the caste are two different concepts. Varna is based on the principle of each according to his worth, while caste is based on the principle of each according to his birth. The two are the distinct as chalk is from cheese. In fact, this is an antithesis between the two. If the Mahatma believe as he does in every one following his or ancestor calling, then the most certain is advocating the caste system. Is calling in the Varna system, he is not only guilty of the testimonial inexecuted, but he is causing confusion, words confounded. I am sure that all his confession is due to the fact that the Mahatma has no definite and clear conception in what is Varna and what is caste, and to the necessity of his conservation of the Hindus. He has said on the hope that he will not find some mystic reason to change his view. The caste is not the essence of the Hinduism, but regard Varna is the essence of Hinduism. One cannot yet give any categorical answer. Readers of his article, Dr. Ambedkar's indictment, will answer no. In this article, he does not say that the dogma of the Varna is essential part of the creed of Hinduism. Far from making Varna the essence of the Hinduism, he says, the essence of Hinduism is contained in its enunciation of one's only God and truth and bold acceptance of the Ahimsa as the law of the human family. 9.7. But readers of his article, his reply to Mr. Santaram will say, yes, in that article he says, how can a Muslim remain one if he rejects the Quran? Or Chaitanya Christian remain Christian if he rejects Bible. If caste and Varna are convertible, or if the Varna is an integral part of the Shastra which define Hinduism, I do not know how a person who rejects caste, that is Varna, can call himself a Hindu. Why this prevarications? Why does the Mahatma hedge? Whom does he want to plead? Has the saint failed to sense the truth, or does the politician stands in the way of the saints? 9.8. The real reason why Mahatma is suffering from his confusion is probably to be traced to two sources. The first is the temperament of the Mahatma. He has in almost everything the simplicity of the child with a child's capacity of self-deception. Like a child, he can believe in anything he wants to believe. We must therefore wait till such time that is please the Mahatma to abandon his faith in Varna and please him to abandon his faith in caste. The second source of confusion is that double role which his Mahatma want to play of the Mahatma and the politician. As a Mahatma, he may be trying to spiritualize politics, whether he has succeeded in it or not. Politics have suddenly commercialized him. A politician must know that society cannot bear the whole truth, and that must not speak the whole truth. If he is speaking the whole truth, it is bad for his politics. The reason why Mahatma is always supporting caste and Varna is because of his afraid that if he opposed them, he would lose his place in politics. Whatever may be the source of his confusion, of Mahatma must told that he is deceiving himself and also deceiving the people by preaching caste under the name of Varna. 10.1. The Mahatma says that the standard I have applied to test Hindus and Hinduism are too severe, and the judge by the one standard, every knowing living faith will probably fail. The complaint that my standards are high may be true, but the question is not whether they are high or whether they are low. The question is whether they are right standard to apply. The people of their religion must be judged by the social standard based on the social ethics. No other standard would have any meaning if religion is held to be necessary good for the well-being of the people. Now, I remain that the standard I have applied to test Hindus and Hinduism are the most appropriate standard, and that I know of none other than better. The conclusion that every known religion would fail if tested by my standard may be true, but this fact should not give the Mahatma as the champion of the Hindus and Hinduism as a ground for comfort, or any more than existence of one madman should give comfort to another madman, and existence of one criminal should give comfort to another criminal. 10.3. I would like to assure Mahatma It is not the mere failure of Hindus and Hinduism which has produced me in the feeling of disgust and contempt with which I am charged. I realize that the world is very imperfect world, and everyone want to live in the it must bear with its imperfection. But while I am prepared to bear with the imperfection and the shortcoming of the society in which I may be destined to labor, I feel I should not consent to live in a society with cherished wrong ideals, or a society which having right ideals. Will not consent to bring its social life into conformity with those ideals. If I am disgusted with the Hindus and Hinduism, it is because I am convinced that they cherish wrong ideals and live in a wrong social life. My quarrel with Hindus and Hinduism is not over the imperfection of their social conduct. It is much more fundamental. It's over their ideals. 11.1. Hindu society seems to me a stand in need for moral regeneration, which is the dangerous to postpone. And the question is, who can determine the control of this uh, regeneration? Obviously, only those who have undergone an intellectual regeneration, and those who are honest enough to have the courage of the conviction born of the intellectual emancipation. Judged by this standard, the Hindus leader who count are, in my opinion, quite unfit for the task. It is impossible to say that they undergone the preliminary intellectual generation. If they have undergone an intellectual regeneration, and they would neither delude themselves in the simple way of untaught multitude, nor would they take advantage of the primitive ignorance of and see then doing. 11.2. Notwithstanding the crumbling state of Hindu society, these leaders will nevertheless unblushingly appeal to ideals of the past which have in every way ceased to have any connection with the present. Ideals which, however suitable they might be, have been in the days of their origin, have now become a warning rather than guide. They will have a mystic respect for the earlier form, and which make them disclined, nay opposed, to the examination of the foundation of their society. The Hindus masses ask of the course of incredible headless in the formation of their belief, but so are the Hindus' leader. And what is worse is the Hindus' leader become filled with the illicit passion of their belief, and when anyone opposed to rob them of their championship. 11.3. The Mahatma is no exception. The Mahatma appeared not to believe in thinking. He preferred to follow the saints. Like a conservative with his reverence of the consecrated notion, he is afraid that if he once start thinking, many ideals and the institutions to which he clinch will be doomed. One must sympathize with him, for every act of independence thinking puts some portion of an apparently stable world in peril. 11.4. But it is actually equally true that dependence on saint cannot lead us to know the truth. The saints are, after all only human beings, and Lord, as the Lord Balfour said, the human mind is no more a truth-finding apparatus than the snout of a pig. In so far as he does think, to me, he really appeared to be prostituting his intelligence to find reasons and supporting his ethic and archaic social structure of the Hindus. He is the most influential apologist of it, and therefore the worst enemy of the Hindus. Unlike the Mahatma, there are Hindu leaders who are not content merely to believe and follow. They dare to think and act in accordance with the result of their thinking. But unfortunately, they either a dishonest lot and an indifferent lot. And when it comes to the question of giving right guidance to the masses of the people, almost every Brahmin had transgresses the rule of the caste. The number of the Brahmins who sell shoe is far greater than those who practice priesthood. Not only have the Brahmin given their insisted calling for the priesthood for trading, but they have entered trade which are profitable for them by the Shastras. Yet how many Brahmins who break caste every day will preach against caste and against the Shastras? For one honest Brahmin preaching against caste and Shastras, because it is practical, distinct, and moral conscience cannot support the conviction of them, there are hundreds who break caste and temple upon the Shastras every day, but who are the most fanatic uphold of the theory of the caste and sanctity of the Shastras. Why does this duplicity? Because they feel that if the masses are emancipated from the yoke of the caste, they would be a menace in the power and priest of the Brahmins as a class. The dishonesty of this intellectual class who would deny the masses the fruit of their thinking is a most disgraceful phenomena. The Hindus in the world of the Matthew Arnold are wandering between two worlds, one dead and the powerless to be the born. What are they to? The Mahatma to whom they appeal for the guidance does not believe in thinking and can therefore give no guidance which can be said to stand the rest of the experience. The intellectual class to whom the masses look for guidance are either too dishonest and too indifferent to educate them in the right direction. We are indeed witness to a great tragedy in the fact of this. In the face of this tragedy, all one can do is to lament and say, such are they leaders, O Hindus. Thank you so much. Please subscribe the channel, share and like the channel.